Hi guys, welcome back to MyJewelryBench.com. This is Pete. Today we're going to cover some tips and tricks and some tools that you can use to remove rust from a watch. Before I continue, I want to apologize for the video. My good camera kind of died and I'm using a new camera. I'm still getting used to how to set it to take some macro shots of video, so bear with me in this video. I know it's a little underexposed and you will see some darkness in some of the video. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is start taking the watch apart, and you're going to do this very carefully. This watch is not seriously rusted, but it's not good, and we're going to have to go through each and every part of this watch. And I'm going to take it apart and examine every single part as it comes off of the watch. Now here you can see I'm removing a screw here, and it's not rusted. However, you should be aware that sometimes you're going to have some screws on watches that are going to be bad. When you do get a watch that has some very rusty screws on it, what I would recommend is getting yourself either a good heavy watch oil, or sometimes I'll use, what is that, Marvel Mystery Oil that you can get at any auto parts store. And I will put a couple drops onto the screw and onto the movement so that the oil has a chance to get into those screws and allow it to seep in and give you some extra removal power. The oil helps. It breaks down a little bit of the rust. It's not perfect, but what we're trying to do here is not break the screw off into the movement, because that's what happens most of the time. And when you get screw damage on a watch movement, it typically starts somewhere around where the crown attaches to the watch, because that's usually the first place water will seep in. So as I continue to break down the watch, you can see I'm kind of looking at every single part here, and I'm putting all the parts that are rusty aside so that I can examine them later and then start cleaning them. Obviously this watch has probably a third of the parts contaminated with rust. Luckily nothing was totally corroded, so everything came apart pretty easily and pretty quickly. Most of the gears were unaffected. Actually all of the gears were unaffected, thankfully, because that tends to be the most expensive part of the watch. But you can see some of the clicks and the springs all had some damage on them, and what I wanted to do here was just see if I could save the watch for the customer, because that's what he wanted to have done. So after you get all the parts off the watch, it's time to look at it as a whole, and I'm looking here at the main plate, and I'm going to start by using a fiber brush. You can get these fiber brushes on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below where you can get these. I use a nylon fiber brush and a fiberglass brush to remove rust. There is some considerations when using either. The nylon is pretty good because it'll get most surface rust that isn't corroded or isn't exposed to the watch for a very long time. It'll get it right off, and the nylon is cleanable. You can actually soak the nylon tip in some cleaner and wipe it off and get any debris out of it. So here you can see I'm just gently wiping off the parts before I start removing anything else. I'm going to flip over the movement and just start working on that side. And I'm just trying to get all the surface rust I can off only with the nylon brush right now. The nylon brush is better to use when you have light rust damage because it doesn't leave any debris along. It will leave a little bit of debris, but for the most part you're going to wipe it all down, loosen all the rust up, and then you can start to the next step. So you can see the tip's getting a little dirty, and that's okay. I'll just throw it in some cleaner or some, sometimes I'll use acetone or mineral spirits, and that just loosens up some of the surface rust a little bit better. I would never suggest using a brass or a steel wire brush on parts like this because you want everything as smooth as possible. Sometimes you can get away with using a brass brush on screw heads if you have some serious damage here. Now I'm just looking at this gear. It just has a little bit of surface rust on it. It's not bad. I'm just going to wipe that off with the nylon brush. Again, you can see how well the nylon brush works for light rust damage. If this was getting corroded or pitted, as the picture showed here, perhaps I use a little bit of a brass brush to just wipe off those screw heads and make sure that the corrosion was off so I could at least disassemble it. In that photo, unfortunately, that watch, most of those parts would have to be replaced. Here you're looking at the winding gear for the mainspring, and this is all surface rust, so I'm just going to use the nylon brush to get as much of this off as possible. Again, I apologize for the camera. I'm still getting used to it. The next few videos should be a whole lot better. now that I've had some experience with it. And I'm just going to wipe these down. Again, I might use occasionally the fiberglass brush if the rust is too deep. And so here you can see I'm using a fiberglass brush, and that's going to do a much better job of removing the rust. I've just got this over some watch paper so that I can keep the debris off my bench. And I'm going to get in there in every little nook and cranny. The fiberglass brush has a little bit better friction on it. However, little bits of fiber will stay on the watch part, so it's going to have to be cleaned either way. But definitely, if you're using a fiberglass brush, you're going to have to clean just about every single part. But you can see the fiberglass brush got almost all the rust off of that part, and I think we're going to use that here. I'm just going to get into these little nooks and crannies where the rust is seeped in and got a little harder, almost started to corrode the steel. So you can see how well that works. It takes off just about every little bit of rust on this particular watch. Again, with the fiberglass, you just have to be careful. Little bits of fiberglass will break off those tips and just get into every little nook and cranny in your watch part. But again, it is a much better way to clean these. It does leave some micro scratches on the movement parts, so you're just going to have to keep that in mind. But it's definitely not as bad as brass or a steel brush would do, and much better than using like emery paper or sandpaper. And you can get deep into these parts with the fiberglass brush that you can't get in with the nylon brush. They're a little bit smaller and finer, so that's the purpose of the fiberglass brushes. Now, fiberglass brushes will wear out faster, so if you're going to buy them for this particular application, just get your hands on maybe 3 or 4 sets. They do wear out, and you can turn these like a ballpoint pen, and the fibers will come out a little bit farther. There's about 3 inches of fiber in these pens. The dial, there's not much I can do with the dial here, unfortunately. We could have it restored for the customer. That's about a $300 job if he wants to have it done, or we could find a replacement. Now here again, I'm going to use the fiberglass brush on the hands. The customer wants to keep these hands, so I'm just going to wipe off the rust, and eventually we're going to give these a coat of lacquer paint so that we can reseal them and recoat them. After you're done cleaning the rust off of watch parts, I would suggest just soaking them in some mineral spirits or maybe some acetone, depending on the parts. Now, you're going to have to be very careful. Certain parts don't like acetone, so just keep that in mind. And if it's a painted part, the acetone will destroy the paint. So I would not put hands, watch hands, in the acetone. I would just use like mineral spirits on those. Screws are a lot harder to work with. Screw heads, I don't mind using a little bit of wire pen brush on these because the brass pen will get the rust off of the screw head, but you have to be careful on a threaded side, so I stick with the nylon and the fiberglass brushes. Here on the clutch gears here, we're just going to pull it all apart. I'm going to wipe these down. The post is the most damaged part on this particular watch, so we're going to get in there and just wipe it all off. So once you get all that done and it's all wiped off, again, these parts go into a mineral spirits bath, and I'll sit in there for about 5 minutes, and then I'll put these in parts baskets into the ultrasonic cleaner with some watch cleaning solution, and then we will rinse them and reassemble the watch. So those are my tips and tricks. And if you do have a screw that is stuck in a watch, there are some good screw removers. I'll put a link to those in the description also below. Here is the link to the nylon brushes, or this is a complete set: brass, steel, nylon, and fiber. Or you could just buy the fiberglass and nylon brushes separately. I'll put links to all of these again in the description below and on the website. So after cleaning, the watch is all assembled, and you can see that it cleaned up really good. And once we replaced the mainspring on this, cleaned everything up, oiled it, and timed it, this watch was keeping pretty good time for the damage that it's had to it. I hope you all found this helpful, and if it did, please give it a thumbs up and share it on social media. And if you want any more tips and tricks, you can head over to my website, www.myjewelrybench.com, where I have tips on watch repairs, jewelry designing, and 3D printing. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day, and happy 2021. May it be a much better year.